As I mentioned to you, you can write it down if you want. He was elected President of the United States 4 times. He was elected in 1932, 1936, 1940, and 1944. 4 consecutive terms. The only man in American history to have done so. So he was elected President of the United States 4 times, 1932, 1936, 1940, and 1944, thus becoming the only man in American history to be elected 4 times to the presidency. Now, on March 29th, 1945, what's in full bloom, so to speak? On March 29th of 1945, what's in full bloom? World War II. Very good. So we're kind of jumping ahead, and we'll jump back next year. But on March 29th, 1945, in the middle of World War II, President Roosevelt leaves the White House, and he decides to go on vacation, and he goes to Warm Springs, Georgia, for a little R&R. Okay? March 29th, 1945, President Roosevelt leaves the White House. He's in the middle of a world war, wants to get out and get a little restful vacation, been a little bit stressful for him. So he travels to Warm Springs, Georgia, just to kind of rest and recuperate a little bit, try to get rid of some of the stress of dealing with the Second World War. Does it on March 29th. And he's there several days. And on April 12th of 1945, after being there almost a couple weeks, not quite 2 weeks, he was working at his desk while an artist was painting his portrait. His plan was to attend a barbecue that afternoon. So on April 12th of 1945, he's sitting at his desk working. As he's sitting at his desk working, a painter is there painting, an artist is there painting his portrait, which happens sometimes. And he wants to get his work done and get this portrait completed because his plan is to attend a barbecue that afternoon. Suddenly he turns to the artist and kind of whispers, quote, "I have a terrible headache," and then fell over in his chair. Okay, so he whispers in the vicinity of the artist, "I have a terrible headache," and then he fell over in his chair. The headache resulted in a cerebral hemorrhage of the brain, which took President Roosevelt's life. So the headache resulted in a cerebral hemorrhage of the brain and took President Roosevelt's life. He would be buried at Hyde Park, New York. Okay, and the last thing we're going to talk about today is the 100 days. The 100 days. Anybody have an idea what that might mean? 100 days? It's kind of something.
The first 100 days was the first.
It's the first 100 days of his presidency, which, because he got so much done, which we'll talk about, this became in history as the 100 days. Every president since is kind of first evaluated by what he does the first 100 days in office. So you will see the 100-day evaluation, and that would be about 3 months. So we'll talk about the 100 days. Now, Franklin Roosevelt barely moved into the White House when he was plunging himself into action. He was not messing around. He had a lot of problems to take care of. And during the first 3 months of his administration, he initiated 15 different pieces of legislation that were passed through Congress. 15 in his first 3 months. So, in the first 3 months of his administration, FDR initiated and had passed 15 different pieces of legislation, which we'll talk about later. Now, what did these laws what were they all concerned with? What were they passed for? To get us out of the Great Depression. Okay? So, these new laws were to help fight every aspect of the Great Depression. The period of time when 15 laws were passed were first referred to as the 100 days, and from this point on in American history, as I mentioned, the first 3 months of a president's terms was referred to as the 100 days. Now the 100 days would become a term used for the American people to evaluate what a president had accomplished in his first 100 days in office. They can kind of get a prediction of whether you're going to be a success or a failure on what you get done the first 100 days. Now it's generally stated to the American people, if good things are happening within the first 100 days in office, chances are the presidency will be successful. If there are issues in the first 100 days of office, that's not so much what's going to happen. Now we'll end by telling you a little story. One of our more famous presidents had a really pretty tough first 100 days. Anybody know who that might be?